All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris McKenzie. I'm with Grow Appalachia of Berea College. I'm here with my colleagues Mark Walden and Kayla Preston and Matt Wilson. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We're here to talk about a small-scale irrigation setup that you can use in a high tunnel or in a small garden or market garden field. We're going to go over the just kind of step-by-step how to set it up and then take your questions. This can be one of those things that can be an intimidating process for folks if they haven't walked through it. So we just wanted to make sure to provide that opportunity for you. So we're glad you're here. If you didn't hear me before, you will be muted. And if you'll go ahead and stay muted throughout the course of the evening, and we'll be taking questions through the chat box. And you can locate that chat box in the menu at the bottom of your screen. If you move your mouse, you should be able to find that chat box. Once you click that, a box will open up to your right, and in the bottom of that box is where you can enter your questions, and Matt Wilson will be administrating questions for us tonight. So kind of after each segment, we'll be stopping and taking a break and letting folks ask questions through the chat. This process will be recorded, so if anybody isn't able to join us tonight or missed something and wants to rewatch it, we'll record the whole thing and put it up on YouTube and send you all the link. So, and also you can share that with your friends, of course. All right. So today we're talking about just a basic setup and installation. So in the future, we're planning on having more workshops on planning and design. So there's a lot that goes into these systems, and hopefully this system will work without much tweaking for you if you've got a small scale application that you're using it for. But for folks who are trying to design larger systems and maybe for their whole market garden or farm, then there's going to be a little bit more to cover. So we've got a planning and design workshop that we'll do, and also a water management, which both of those will contain good information for everybody that's on the call tonight. So next. All right, so tonight's system will be good for approximately 3,000 square feet or around the size of a high tunnel. So, and it just depends on how much flow that you've got coming out of your system, and also, how many drip lines you're going to run off of it. So tonight we're talking about a specific kind of drip irrigation called drip tape, and that tape's going to have a certain amount of flow coming out of each emitter. So that's going to kind of dictate how big or small, how many lines you can run off depending on how much flow that you've got coming from your water source. So tonight's, we're mostly going to cover our water sources like a municipal system, so like a hydrant or a spigot coming from a house or something like that. So flow rates are going to vary depending on your system. But for the most part, this will cover the square footage that I talked about, 3,000 square feet or a high tunnel. So we're not going to calculate layout and design tonight. Like I said earlier, that'll be covered in later workshops. Consideration that you'll have to think about for your system is flow, both from whatever water source you're using, as well as the drip tape. And if you have questions about those things, you can always check with your supplier, Martin's Produce in Liberty, Kentucky, or Schrott's Produce in Crab Orchard, Kentucky. There's also DripWorks online. Those are all great resources for drip irrigation. So, and they're also happy to help you out with your systems. If you do need, next please. just to give you an idea about the size that this system will cover, we've gone ahead and laid it out a little bit in a chart here for you. So you can estimate your flow rate by taking a 1 gallon jug and filling it and timing how long it takes to fill that jug. So for example, here in the chart, if it takes 20 seconds to fill a gallon jug, you've probably got a very low flow. And if depending on the type of product, drip tape that you're going to use, for a 100-foot strip, you can use about 3 to 6 of those strips, depending on how much flow is coming from the emitters. Now that drip tape will be labeled with a gallons per minute, and that's the flow that comes from 100 feet of this drip tape. So in the example here, we've got 0.45 gallons per minute or 1 gallon per minute, and those are two pretty popular products that are on the market. The 1 gallon per minute is a little bit higher flow, so you only be able to run 3 strips, for example, if it takes 20 seconds. Now on the other end, if it takes 6 seconds to fill your gallon bucket, then you can run as many as 20 strips, 100-foot strips of drip tape. Or if you're using that higher flow tape at 1 gallon per minute, you can run about 10. So that's approximately the size of system that we're talking about tonight. Beyond that, you're going to have to zone your system, which just means you're going to be able to turn off and on certain parts of your drip irrigation system so that you're only using so many strips of drip at one time, right? You can still use the same water source, but you'll only be able to water with, say, 20 strips of drip at one time. And if you've got 40, then you'll have to turn off 20 and turn on the others. And you can do that with the system that we're talking about tonight through the valves that you'll see during the installation videos. Or you can actually install a timer to shut off certain parts of your zones, part of your system, so that you can set that up to run automatically. You don't have to go out there and turn any valves or anything like that. Next, please. If you do want to learn more about planning and laying out a drip irrigation system, this is a great resource. This is DripWorks, the company that I talked about that's online. And this is a PDF guide that they've created for all of the considerations around drip irrigation. So it's a really great resource. And we'll be sharing that with you all in our post-workshop email. It'll also be in the links. The links will be posted with our YouTube videos as well. So next, please. All right, so we're going to watch a brief introduction video that we shot about this small-scale drip irrigation system.
Hi there, I'm Kayla. I work with Grow Appalachia. We're a program of Berea College, and today I'm going to be showing you all how to install drip irrigation from a municipal hydrant into your header line, down the drip tape, and into the end plug. Our targeted audience is for small-scale growers, backyard growers, or farmers who are working in high tunnels or in fields.
Hi, I'm Chris McKenzie with Grow Appalachia, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of drip irrigation. So drip irrigation is a system for efficiently watering your garden and crops. So this system is going to deliver water directly to the root systems where it's needed. It's not going to water weeds, and it's going to keep your leaves on your crops dry so that it prevents disease. There's lots of benefits to drip irrigation. And so if you're really a serious gardener or a market farmer, it's going to be something that you want to consider. So drip irrigation in a high tunnel system is particularly critical because we don't have overhead rain, right? And so we're going to need something to water our plants and keep them healthy, be able to deliver water consistently and right to where the crops need it. So whenever you're undertaking a project like this, it's going to be important to A, think about safety, and B, look into your local regulations. So in terms of safety, it's going to be important that if you're digging out any at all for example, if you're burying a water line or something like that, you're going to want to call 811 before you dig, and just make sure there's no underground utilities that you might not be aware of. Now, in terms of regulations, we've talked a little bit about this vacuum breaker, and so that's one of the things that a county or a city might require. So you want to look into those. It may be necessary for you to get a licensed plumber to install certain aspects of this system. Also, we wanted to mention, the Natural Resources Conservation Service funds a lot of different irrigation type projects, and they're also going to have specific requirements for your system. So, for example, they might require a more robust filter than what we've shown today, and they're also going to require this vacuum breaker. So just be sure to look up all the rules and regulations, and also keep safety in mind as you do this project.
All right, next slide, please, Matt. So I just want to say a few more things about disease. So drip irrigation is a great way to help control, especially moisture-related diseases. For example, water molds or fungal diseases. One of the main ways that diseases enter a plant is through the leaves. And so oftentimes we have this factor of soil splash, right? So if you're watering with a hose or something like that, you can splash water up onto the leaves, and that soils where the disease has been overwintering, and so that's often an introduction point for disease. Now, in a high tunnel, drip irrigation systems are even more effective because you don't have that overhead rainfall that's a factor, so you can keep the leaves really dry, and you can eliminate that splash factor, right? Which you might get through a sprinkler or a hose if you're watering that way. So next slide, please. Blossom end rot is also another water-related issue that a lot of folks, especially tomato growers, have. And a lot of folks think that blossom end rot is a calcium deficiency, which it is, but it's not always a calcium deficiency in your soil. Oftentimes it's water-related. Because if you've got plenty of calcium in the soil, but you don't have enough water, the plant is not going to be able to absorb calcium efficiently, and therefore you're going to be more prone to blossom end rot. Same thing if you overwater, the calcium in the soil gets diluted, and again, your plant's not getting enough calcium, and it's causing blossom end rot. So water management is a big factor in a lot of different diseases and problems. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Kayla here, and she's going to show the next section of our video.
So we're standing here in front of the high tunnel. We've brought all of our fittings out and we put them on a table. This is ideally what you all want to do because it's hard to bend over in front of the tunnel. Just really easy to put all this stuff together in front of you where you have clean space. All right, so first we're going to start with the vacuum breaker. The vacuum breaker will be hooked directly up to your hydrant spigot from just a standard hose here. And the vacuum breaker's purpose is to prevent any sort of contaminants getting back into your municipal water source. The vacuum breaker is required here in our county and may also be required in your county. And also the NRCS requires this vacuum breaker. There are other types of backflow preventers, one being a check valve, the other being a double check valve, and then the other is a backflow preventer itself, the name of it. So that's our first main key piece here. And then we just have a couple of adapters. As you see here, we got a few here, and a few here. These adapters are just to either switch it from pipe thread to hose thread or vice versa. You will need to use Teflon tape to attach all of these adapters unless there is a grommet inside of the adapter. So we have our vacuum breaker, we'll attach these, and then we go to a pressure reducer. This is a 3/4 inch as well as everything else on the table here. That's pretty standard. This pressure reducer takes the water pressure down to 15 PSI. That is standard for the drip tape that most people use in the fields. And you can get this from any of the greenhouse supply companies around your area. We go to a couple more fittings, adapters, and then it takes us to our spin filter. Our spin filter is what filters the water of all the small particles in the water. So sand, debris, things like that. The reason why you have that is because you don't want those types of things in your drip tape. That's what's going to clog your drip tape. We go to a couple more fittings, and then that'll take us down to our timer, which will eventually feed into the main line, header line. Okay, so here we have one type of timer. There are many different types of timers out there. This is an Orbit brand, and it's got a 4-way at the end. This enables you to water your high tunnel separately from, let's say, your garden or a different size garden, orchard. So then you go down your hose. This is just your standard garden hose, 3/4 inch, and do a couple more fittings. You also need to use Teflon tape on these. And then this is where you get into your first change in size. This is a 3/4 inch to a 1.5 inch hose threading. This is what you're going to need to feed eventually right in here, which is your insert adapter, which goes into your main line, and then you will tie that down with a hose clamp. Alrighty, so we're here at the table still, and I'm going to show you all how to apply the Teflon tape, where it is needed in the entire assembly, and show you the direction that it needs to be going, as well as the tightness. So I'm just going to show you all first off here with our first adapter. As you see here, these are the two different types of threading. This is the pipe thread and this is the hose thread. Just to give you a little bit of measurement there. So I'll take the Teflon and I'm going to be looking at the threading here, and you're going to want to run the Teflon tape in the direction of your threading. So you'll take your Teflon tape and just wrap it around 3, 4, 5 times is good. If you wrap it too much, then it's going to mess with the threading and most likely cause a leak. So that's good enough. Just rip it off. Make sure it's nice and attached to the other side of the tape. And then all you do is just screw it right on in here, but when you're doing it, you want to make sure that the way that your tape direction's going is running with the threading that you're screwing it into. All right, so now that we have it screwed in just a bit with our hands, 3 to 4 times around, then we'll take our tool. This is a pipe wrench. You can use any other sort of adjustable wrench on it, and you'll just want to tie it down roughly 1 time around to where it's nice and taut. That's good enough. Okay, so we're going to hook up the vacuum breaker to the hose, which comes out of your municipal water source. Most hoses, if they're new, they're coming with a washer. It's a tiny little black washer. Just slides right on in there. And in this case, you will not need to use the Teflon tape because this acts as the sealer. So just push that on down in there and screw it on here. Okay, so this is the assembly here, and we're going to take everything over to the tunnel and tie it into the header line. Okay, so here we are in front of the high tunnel and our spigot. This is where we're going to be hooking up our vacuum breaker and the rest of the assembly. You want your vacuum breaker to be at least 12 inches above the highest point in the tunnel or in the field that you're going to be irrigating. That's why we have a T-post set up here, and we will install it by using hose clamps. So here we can have a hose clamp. This is probably like a 3 to 4 inch or something of that nature. It just needs to be big enough to wrap around and tighten down. We're using an impact driver, definitely not necessary. You could use a little socket bit or whatever you have. So just open it up. All right, so I'm going to show you all how to hook up the vacuum breaker and assembly to the spigot. And this is the hose that's coming out of the bottom of the vacuum breaker. We have our grommet and
all right, so that's the first part of the video. Please feel free to ask the questions in the chat box. Also, if you all are hearing or getting any sort of glitches in the video, please let us know so we can try to troubleshoot that throughout the rest of the workshop. All right, so here is a high tunnel. This is at the Brea Urban Farm, and this high tunnel has water catchment gutters off of the hip boards running into a catchment tank. This tank is 550 gallons. This is what you see pretty standard with any high tunnel that's funded through the NRCS. As you see here, the gutter just runs from the water, excuse me, from the high tunnel with a piece of plastic flap into the gutter, down into the tank, and then at the bottom of the tank, you see an outflow with a ball valve as well as an overflow. That's the white PVC that you see coming out and it goes down into the ground away from the tunnel. That ball valve will run right under the baseboard and into the tunnel, which is where your pump is located. Next, please. Here's the pump. This is pretty standard, especially if anybody, if you've seen any tunnels out there that have been recently funded through the NRCS. This is a standard Intex pool filter pump. It uses a sand, a silicone sand, a really thin, fine sand that goes through the larger catchment down into the drum, which is where it processes all of the contaminants and particles from your tanks down into all of the fittings, where this is where you're going to see your check valve. This is where you're going to see the pressure reducer, and then directly into the main line. This is orchard tubing going into the drip tape with a valve. Next. So this is another pump. This pump is, I just wanted to show you all kind of how creative you can get with the foundations. This foundation is really sturdy. It is outside of the tunnel, so that's one thing I do want to mention. It's a good idea to put your pump inside the tunnel to keep it protected from the weather and so on. And next, please. So here's the timer that we just showed you all in the video. This runs about $75, I believe. Is really great to irrigate many different places in your area, in the garden. A couple of things that you want to be mindful of, and Chris mentioned this earlier, is when you're irrigating in the tunnel, you want to check the soil for moisture. You know, obviously you're stopping the rain from getting in contact with the soil. So you're going to have to irrigate a lot more than outside, which is why this timer is really nice, because you can set it on different sites and it can irrigate different times, all sorts of things, and isn't that expensive. And also, you know, when you're irrigating outside, you want to check your moisture there as well. You know, consistency is key in soil when you're growing crops. So just be thinking about that before you just turn it on, because you can, and it may have been harvested from the rain. Okay, next. All right, so here we're gonna show the next video. All right, so here we are inside the tunnel, and I'm gonna show you all how to hook up your hose from your spigot through a couple of adapters and into your header line, also known as lay flat. This is 1.5 inches. They come in 2 inch. We just regularly use 1.5 inches. So when you're going to insert your adapter into your lay flat, it can be quite difficult. You know, it's a really tight fit. So you can use any sort of lubrication, you know, Vaseline, any sort of oil like that, and or just trying to push it in. And you just want to wiggle it in, twisting it. You can shove it around, just whatever makes sense. I've seen people cut the sides a tad bit and use two pliers and tie it on like that. But as long as you can get it over a few of these nodules here, it stays on just fine. And again, I'm just using a hose clamp to tie it down and keep it tight. And your last step is to screw your hose on. Okay, so here we are with it set up. I just want to point out one thing here. As you see, the insert adapter is not fully touching the lay flat all the way up to the top here. This can cause issues. You know, it can blow off, but something really important is to try your best and to use what you think can work. Tie down your hose clamp really tight, and if you all have any other recommendations of better ways to do this, feel free to add in the comment section below. This is just the best way that we have been able to figure it out. So this is the end of your main line. We've got the end cap with a hose clamp attached to it. You will install this just like you would install the insert adapter at the beginning of your header line. Okay, I'm gonna give a few seconds just to make sure everybody's not lagging or anything like that, and answer or actually just mention one thing. So Mark had some fun with using different sorts of attempts to try to figure out how to get the end cap on a little bit better. and was super successful just with some olive oil, which you'll see in the PDF that we'll give out after this. I think and heating can help too. It's just really difficult in general. It's what I've found to be the case. But like I said in the video, please give us some recommendations. We do a lot of this work in the field, so just send them our way. Okay, so header line options. What you saw in those videos there was lay flat main line, 1.5 inch. Now the NRCS is funding high tunnels with the 2-inch main line of the lay flat. You can also use orchard tubing that comes in many different sizes. Here's an example of some orchard tubing. This is the smaller outer diameter stuff. They've got 1 inch, they've got all sorts of different sizes. The orchard tubing is really great for smaller scale systems or systems that are like really diverse and not just straight lines like a high tunnel or a standard row field. You know, if you actually do have an orchard, I would recommend this as your irrigation line compared to the lay flat or the 12-inch emitter drip tape. Okay, next on that, please, Matt. All right, and so end of the year, you know, just like in your gardens, there's some prep work to be done with irrigation. It's a pretty large investment depending on what you're irrigating and you know what gauge of drip tape you decide to use and things like that. It can be quite costly, so you want to take care of this stuff. You want to flush your lines before you roll it up for the season, and you want to put it up for the season. You really do. You want to put your drip tape up. You want to definitely put your pump up. Your pump will freeze, cause a lot of issues with your plumbing. And then the drip tape, if you leave it out in the field, you know, rodents can get in it. It's just going to weather faster, and then you're going to have to eventually invest in more material. So just be thinking about that. You know, yes, it takes time, but it can help in the long run. So, yeah. And then, you know, when I was thinking earlier about rolling it compared to folding it, I know it's really hard to do it, but if you can try to roll the drip tape as best you can compared to just folding it up and throwing it in the shed, that will also help with the longevity of the materials. Once you get a really heavy like crimp in it, depending on the gauge of the tape, you can poke a hole in it pretty much immediately, and then that whole piece is just done. So just be thinking about that, or I guess you could throw a coupling in it too. But yeah, so just stay mindful of that. Yeah, that's it on that video.
Well, here we are at the header line, and I'm going to show you all how we install our valves for our drip tape. So the first thing that you're going to need is a hole punch. This is a serrated hole punch. There's hole punches of all sorts of different types. This is my preference. I found it to be really efficient. This is the valve. So this valve's got a red handled switch here. You can shut it off position or the on position. Actually, it needs to go this way. So you can shut it in the off position or the on position. And what we're going to do is we're going to poke a hole in this main line. And what I tend to do is poke it on the crease, one side or the other. So it's really easy to make sure you have a straight line going down the lay flat. But the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you get pressure in your lay flat. And this is the most important part, because if you do not have pressure in your lay flat, you can poke the hole easily, but there's an issue with you trying to put the valve in the main line and it just pushing all the way to the other side. So what you need to do is turn on your water. So you need to make sure your end cap is on and all of your fittings are put together properly. So you'll turn your water on and the water's going to start. You see it flowing up pretty good. Once it gets pretty full, then you can go for it. Like I said before, you want to find your crease. And what you're going to do is you're going to poke your hole, cover it with your thumb, grab your valve, and then you'll screw the valve into the main line as soon as you get it plugged into the line. and you will get wet. All right, and then you just screw it on. Make sure it's tight. You can shut your valve. And this is what's going to cause any leak. So if it's not on tight enough, you're going to get a leak. If it's on crooked, you're going to get a leak. You just want to make sure you screw it down tight with your fingers, as goes for the other side. All right, so here we are with our drip tape, our valves, and our main line. And I'm going to show you all how to install it to the valve, as well as installing the end plug at the end of your drip tape. This drip tape here is a 15 mil, which is a very thick drip tape. The standard drip tapes out there that you see in the fields are anywhere between 6, 8, 10 on the drip. So this is a thicker gauge, so it's going to last a little bit longer in the field. You can get a few years out of this. But the way that the emitters work, this is a 12-inch emitter, so there's pretty much a drip hole every 12 inches. And they come in 6 inches and so on and so forth. But the emitter strip here with the blue lines is actually pretty complex once you get into looking at it. We cut a piece open here so you all can take a look, but there's a zigzag that goes under the black plastic that does the work. So I just want to make sure you all could see that there. And the main part of this is to make sure that the emitters are facing up compared to facing down. If they're going to be facing down, there's more chances of you getting any sort of clogging in the holes. And with clogging, then you're going to run into all sorts of issues with moisture levels and all of that. So keep it face up. You want to use a really sharp pair of scissors to cut your drip tape, because it's really important that you get a square cut at the end to make sure you do not have any leaks in your valve. So I'm going to square it up, cut it, and then what we'll do is just slide it on. It's very easy to slide on. And a big important part here is to make sure you get it all the way up into the valve. And then you want to hold your drip tape so it doesn't slide around, and tie it down. And just like this side of it, you want to be really tight. Okay, so that's how you connect it to the valve. And then we're going to install the end plug. And it's the same scenario as this here. It's just a little screw with a barb on the inside of it. So we will take it, screw it on here, and just tie it down. Okay, so something that's pretty important when you're setting up your system or getting it ready again for the following spring, or in the following spring, is you want to flush your main line to relieve any sort of sediment or contaminants that have came up during the installation process. You know, grasses, dirt, anything like that can clog up your drip tape. So the way that we want to do this is just remove your end cap and your hose clamp, and then you'll turn the water on, flush your lines. And when you're flushing your lines, obviously your valves are already installed on your main line. So you want to make sure that your valves are in the off position so they don't run down into your drip tape. We'll flush the main line for about 30 seconds to a minute. You can cut it off, and then you'll just reinstall your end cap like we did earlier in the video. Thanks for checking out our video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and read the description below for updates. Thanks so much for tuning in. You turn the water off.
There was some great blooper reels from that day. Hopefully one day we can share more of them with you. All right. So a few considerations when installing the drip tape. I'm going to review some of what Kayla just demonstrated in the video. You see the punch on the left that Kayla was using in the video. The punch is definitely the better option, but if you lose this, which can occasionally happen on a farm, you lose a tool, you can alternately use a 5/16 inch drill bit, but the drill bit option comes with some risk. Next slide. If you push too hard when you're trying to run the drill bit in, you can run it right through the other side of your lay flat. If you happen to be holding your hand on the other side of that lay flat, it's going to either mean a trip to the emergency room or at least to your medicine cabinet. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what's called a goof plug. This is for when you make a mistake and add a hole that you didn't intend to in your lay flat. You can use this to repair the hole. It's good to have these even if you have your holes in the right position, because you may change up your layout of your drip at some point and you don't want to just throw your lay flat away because your hole is out of line. Next slide, please. When you're preparing to install the red handled valves, you'll probably notice in the video that Kayla mentioned to look for the natural crease in the lay flat. And that crease is where you want to install your red handle valves. That way, if the lay flat is empty and has no water in it, the valves will still sit flat on the ground and you won't have unnecessary stress on the connection point between your valve and the lay flat. Next slide. So each hole in the lay flat is going to correspond to one of your strips of drip tape in your bed layout. You can note here in this example that there are different configurations for the drip tape, depending on the type of crop being grown and the crop spacing requirements. So at the top there, you'll see just a single line of drip tape, and that would be for something like tomatoes. And then at the bottom, you'll see that there's 3 strips of drip tape, and that would be for a crop like lettuce or spinach or something like that, where your spacing can be much closer together. All right. When you're installing the valve in the lay flat, it's definitely a little easier, like Kayla said, with some water pressure in the lay flat. But of course, you're going to get wet, and I think that cost Kayla a t-shirt that day. But the installation goes like this. You push the valve barb into the hole in the lay flat and twist the nut tightly against the lay flat wall. So you can see there in the middle picture, there's a space between that nut and the wall of the lay flat. And you're gonna want to try to turn the nut the wrong direction, but it actually goes to the right and will screw tight against the wall of the lay flat and the back of the barb that's inside. Let's see. All right, so now we're gonna connect our drip tape to our valve. And it's critical that you cut your drip tape straight across or even. This is an exaggerated view, but you can see on the right that angle that the drip tape is cut. You will definitely have water leaking out of that cut because once you screw that nut on, it's not gonna have contact with the entire piece of drip tape there. So make sure you cut it square. So when you're putting your drip tape onto your barb on your red handled valve, you just want to slide the drip tape as far up on the barb as possible. And then you're gonna screw that nut there. It will go clockwise and it will go over the top of the drip tape and pinch the drip tape onto the barb. You can see in the bottom picture there that the threads for the nut are shown when it's in the tighten position. All right. So you're going to repeat that those previous steps until you have all your drip line attached to your red handled valves. And like Kayla mentioned, this is a good time to flush your drip tape. So if you flushed your blue lay flat, that is for the pieces of plastic that are going to end up inside of it when you cut your holes for your valves. And you'll want to run some water through your drip tape before you cap the end, just to get any sand or sediment that you might have picked up when you're installing the lay flat onto your valves. All right, so now that you've got all your lines flushed out, you'll install your drip tape plug at the end of each line, and it's going to go on the same as your connection point on your red handled valves. So you just slide that up over the barb and screw your nut over the top of the tape. What you see there in the middle is a repair coupling for drip tape. It's good to go ahead and order some of these ahead of time. It's common for your drip tape to get damaged either by driving T-post or you're doing some weeding around plants, and with a good sharp hoe, it's pretty easy to nick this drip tape. And if the drip tape doesn't have good pressure, you're going to get inconsistent watering from one end to the other. All right, so that's pretty much it for installing your drip tape.